Hello, friends, and welcome back to Weird Wednesdays. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight we're diving deep into the world of the unknown as we explore three creepy, unexplained experiences that took place in the remote, eerie depths of the woods. Before we get started, though, I just want to say thanks to Leslie over at Cryptids Canada and all the cool folks who've come over from there. Welcome. And if any of you guys aren't familiar with our channel, I'll be sure and link it down in the comments below. Now, get ready to feel a chill down your spine as we uncover the true tales of unexplained encounters while hiking, camping, and hunting. So grab your flashlight, tighten your boots, kick back, and just enjoy the ride. Number 1. Dear Tattooed, here's a strange encounter I had while hunting in rural Texas. Was told you might like this. This happened when I was growing up, around 2004 or 2005, when I was about 13 years old. It took place in a rural area, a good ways outside the town of Unexplained, Texas. The town itself was really small back then and not much to look at. It's just one of those towns that really isn't on the way to anywhere important. My father knew someone who owned a deer lease. It was about 1,000 acres, I think, down outside of that area, and was complaining about a ton of hogs that's been tearing up their land. Being open season on hogs in the south, my dad thought that he would surprise me that summer and take me down for a week to go hunting for them. Not only did that help him with networking for his job, but also gave us some quality father-son time. I remember the drive down there from Dallas was pure torture. It was about 7 hours in my dad's hard-top Jeep Wrangler. That car was so uncomfortable I hated it. All I had to do was either stare out the window or try and beat Super Mario Land 2 on my Game Boy. Something I was never able to accomplish in my youth. The drive obviously took most of the day, and when I got there in the early evening, the owner of the land had told my dad that he hadn't had anyone lease it that year yet, and the cabin and the property might be a little rough and dusty. I didn't really care. At this point in my life, I'd been in scouts for a couple of years and spent a lot of my free time out in the woods, hunting or fishing with friends. Needless to say, I was pretty comfortable just roughing it. So after unlocking the gate and driving to the cabin on the land, we settled in. The cabin was pretty rough. Dust and dirt everywhere. Flies. I remember that it looked like some raccoons had gotten into the cabin and crapped on the floor. After cleaning up a bit and getting the sleeping bags out and setting up the cots, we decided to sleep. Something about that night was weird. I never was able to get comfortable enough to fall asleep for any restful amount. I couldn't put my finger on why, but I had that feeling that I was being watched. I was finally able to drift off for what I guessed was about an hour. When we woke up, it was early, around 7 a.m. We decided to scout the land for tracks and signs of hogs and find a good place to set up a blind. It was the summer and horribly hot in the afternoon, so morning was the best time to be out and about. After walking for an hour or so, we came to an area of trees, lightly dense, and luckily found some signs of hogs. Typical torn up ground where they had been rooting, so we followed them into the trees. I was looking for more signs when my dad stopped me with his arm. I remember looking up and seeing someone standing about 50 yards away. Some of their body was blocked by the trees. This was private land, so they definitely weren't supposed to be there. We also had confirmation from the owner before we got the lease that nobody was there. Not to mention, the gate was locked up when we first arrived. The person was wearing some bright-colored red jacket. We slowly walked towards him. My dad called out something like, "Hey, we're hunters. This is private land." The person didn't move at all, stayed dead still. We were about 30 yards away and could see that he was turned away from us and had his hands in his pockets. Weird thing was that the person was in a ski jacket and what looked to be like ski pants. Now this is Texas in the summer, and it was about 98 degrees outside. My dad called out again, but got no reaction. He told me to stay behind him and unsnapped the clip to his pistol holster. That's all we had at the time, since we were only scouting the area and our rifles were back at the cabin. We approached the person's right side, and then my dad told me to stay put about 20 yards away. I stayed and crouched down, watched him circle around to the front of the man, all the while talking to him, asking him if he was okay. He finally passed around to the front of the guy, and my dad stood straight up with a confused look on his face. I called out and said, "What's wrong?" And he called back saying, "It's a mannequin." I walked over while my dad stood there staring. And as I got closer, one thing stood out the most. The clothes it was wearing were brand new. No dust, sap, bird droppings, or signs of being outside for more than a day at most. At that moment, I looked at my dad and I could see him get worried. Almost immediately after, I felt that feeling again, like we were being watched, and I could tell that my dad felt it too. I wanted to start crying. I remember feeling suddenly very scared. My dad leaned down and whispered, "We're leaving right now." He grabbed my hand and drew his pistol again. He scanned the area the whole way back while I was trying to hold back panicked tears. We got back as fast as we could. I was so terrified it felt like an eternity, but in reality it was probably only about 45 minutes. After returning, we packed up and beat feet. We drove back home that day and didn't talk much on the way back. I remember right after we left, my dad called his buddy, the guy who owns the land, and he was confused. He said that he would go check it out next week when he was in the area. He also said that he had never had an issue with people because his property was high fenced. Now my dad normally isn't a paranoid person, but me being young and the lease possibly having someone there that we didn't know about, he decided to be cautious and just get us out of there. After we got back home, we talked, and my dad wasn't able to sleep well that night. He had the same feeling, but he didn't want to wake me up because he thought I was sleeping too. Turns out that next week he got a call from his buddy, and he checked the whole property and never found any trace of anyone, no mannequin or anything. That story still makes my hair stand on end. No idea what that was, but the paranoid guy in me thinks it was some kind of trap or something. Not the creepiest things that's happened to me in the woods, but definitely in the top 3. So whoever was out there, I'm glad that we never met. Number 2. Hey Tattooed, your email address is weird, so if this is right and you get this, let me know. I've included a couple of weird encounters for you. Hi, so I've had a couple of encounters that have left me feeling crazy and super off. I live in central New York, which is where each of these happened. Several months ago, I'd say probably around February or March, I was at a park with one of my friends after dark. We had gone there frequently and nothing had ever seemed weird. My friend was standing off to the side of a shed, a few hundred feet away from me, and I was sitting in my car. I had been zoned out, looking at stuff on my phone, and he had been talking with someone on the phone. It wasn't until I heard this strange barking. It didn't sound human or animal-like per se. I couldn't figure out which direction it was coming from. The sounds seemed to be coming from every direction at once. I looked up and saw my friend quickly walking down the hill before coming to a dead stop. When I looked around, I saw out of my side mirror something stand up from all fours from behind my car and sprint off way too quickly into the surrounding woods. My friend came running back, getting in and locking the doors before saying, "Did you see that thing? It wasn't human. It looked like it, but it was way too tall and skinny. It had ran up behind your car, and when it was going behind your car, it squat down on all fours and then got up and ran off." The second encounter, this happened a few months after, right around the start of spring. I was with 3 of my friends and one of their dads. We were in the middle of the woods at one of the campgrounds. They had gone off for a walk maybe 20-30 minutes ago. I had stayed back to watch the fire. Then suddenly, the world went almost silent. I almost felt like I wasn't even in our world anymore. It's hard to explain. I heard this woman screaming, "No, no, help, someone help me." I had just sat there, staring at the direction that I thought the noise was coming from, which was much deeper in the woods. At first I thought maybe it was one of my friends yelling, but none of them sound like that. Something had also been off about this voice. After a few minutes it trailed off and got quieter as the world returned to normal. My friends returned after another 10 or 15 minutes from a different direction than I'd heard the voice, and they said they hadn't heard anything. So yeah, if anyone knows what these encounters are, or have had similar experiences, please let me know. Number 3. Hey biker, longtime fan here. I had a friend call me on Friday who knows that I'm into this kind of thing. They were in shock at what they had seen and wondered if I had any idea what this could be. I figured I would share it with you and see if any of your listeners have any ideas. Here's what they shared with me. I was camping at Heart Mountain, Hot Springs. At 6:45 a.m., I was leaving my campsite by foot to use the nearest bathroom. The campsite sits above the field, overlooking the road that runs west to the other campsites, a field, creek, and 3 hot springs pools. As I was walking out of my sight, I looked across the field and saw an animal. It was at least 200 feet away. I thought it was a wild horse, but there are no wild horses in the Heart Mountain National Antelope Refuge. This animal's body was facing me, with its head turned slightly to its left. I thought it was a horse because it had a black mane of hair, and its body was brown and shiny. It appeared to be about the size of a yearling at first. I say at first because later I saw a human man in the same location. There's a path there from the west campsites that travel to the parking lot by the way of the east campsites, and I now believe the creature was 7 feet to 8 feet tall. It turns its head slightly, right directly towards me, and then it turned its body left and walked across the parking lot toward the bridge across the creek, and I lost sight of it in the trees. It was bipedal. It didn't move quickly, walking with its back slightly forward and arms swinging at its sides. I later looked for footprints, but the ground was too hard to find any. I crossed the bridge and walked a little ways up the creek, looking for any evidence like hair, and couldn't locate anything. What do you think? My only thoughts are either a person dressed in some kind of ceremonial gear or animal skin, or an animal with chronic wasting disease, which also seems unlikely given that it was bipedal. Number 4. Dear Biker, this story is unfortunately true. I grew up in the Sierra Nevadas. I wasn't big on camping, but spent a good chunk of my childhood weekends hiking with family and friends. That summer, I was 16, about 10 years ago now. My cousin, C, had come back from her first year of college, and her boyfriend Jay was visiting. Jay wanted to go on a hike with lake views, and C and I knew just the one. It was one of our favorites. The 3 of us set off on this hike. The trail isn't the easiest to find, but it's really popular with locals because of the view and the general lack of tourists. We saw a couple of other hikers, some with dogs, It's an in and out trail that takes about 2 to 3 hours to the top and 2 to 3 hours back down. There are some smaller trails that branch off. We make it to the top in good time and enjoy our lunches overlooking the lake. After about an hour, we hear a scream off in the distance. Specifically, a mountain lion scream. If you've never heard a mountain lion scream, it's really unnerving. It sounds a bit like a very loud and terrified woman screaming. This isn't good because when a mountain lion screams, it's a part of the mating ritual. That means there are multiple mountain lions, and close. The bear and the Sierras are softies, but the mountain lions will attack you. They'll attack your pets. They've even been known to attack bikers. Jay was really freaked out. C and I were wary, but it wasn't the first time we had heard mountain lions, and we had both seen them before. There was also an incident where, as kids, we had laid out some expensive steak in my backyard in the hopes of luring a mountain lion to take pictures of it. It ended up not working, and my mom was unhappy about the steaks. C and I tell Jay that we need to pack it up and get back down the mountain. About 40 minutes into the hike back, Jay realized that he forgot his phone at the lookout in our rush to leave. We decided that C and Jay would hike back to retrieve his phone, and I would stay there on the trail to warn any potential hikers that there are lions in the area. This is obviously not ideal for any of us, but it seemed like the best choice at the time. I found a nice rock to sit on by the trail and was going through the pictures we took. C and Jay had been gone for around 50 minutes when I heard the scream again. And it's hard to tell, but I think it's closer than before. I start freaking out because being alone isn't good if the lion is nearby. About 20 minutes after that, I hear the scream again, and now that I know that it's closer. Logically, I know that lions don't scream when hunting. They're quiet. If a lion was hunting me, I wouldn't know it. That knowledge didn't make me any less afraid. A couple of minutes later, I hear it again, this time extremely close by. I'm looking around and trying to find the best place for me to stand, back covered, in case of the worst. Suddenly, I see something out of the corner of my eye. Standing about 20 feet down the trail, a couple of feet off of it, is a man. And he's completely naked. He's filthy, he's skinny, and he's just standing there, looking right at me. If you don't know where you're going, it's easy to get lost in the woods around here. And it doesn't take long being alone, lacking food and water in the wilderness, to make people disoriented and a little crazy. My immediate response is that this man is probably just a lost hiker, and judging by how dirty he was, he's been lost for a long time. He needs help. I started walking towards him, asking if he's okay. I suddenly get this feeling of wrongness. I don't know how else to describe it, but the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I froze maybe 15 feet away now, and had the overwhelming urge to just run. It seemed so wrong. He looked wrong in a way that I can't quite articulate. Instead of wanting to help, now I'm scared. I ask again if he's okay. He looks straight at me, then opens his mouth wide and screams. Not a normal scream. He screams so loud, and worse, it sounded just like the mountain lion. It occurred to me that we were probably hearing him the whole time. It was the single most terrifying thing that I've ever witnessed. I started screaming too. Why was he just standing there, screaming? Do I run? Do I hit him with the bear mace? Suddenly, he closed his mouth, turned around, and just ran into the woods, really quickly. Then he disappeared into the trees, but the feeling of wrongness was still with me. I considered bolting down the trail, but decided to wait for C and J, who luckily arrived in about 5 minutes. I told them what happened, and we decided to call it in to the Rangers when we got service. I've always been left with the unsettling question: did I see a mentally ill, lost hiker who really needed my help, or did I see something else? Something not quite human, mimicking the call of a mountain lion and stalking us down the mountain. And there it is. 4 bone-chilling stories that leave us questioning the mysteries lurking just beyond the beaten path. Just remember, when you venture deep into the woods, be prepared for the unexpected and keep your eyes wide open, for the unknown is always closer than you think. So thanks for joining me on this adventure. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you soon. A little on down the road a ways. Biker, out.